Hey facilitators, Meg Bolger here from Facilitator Cards. What you are about to check out is our April Brain Jam on OBS, Open Broadcaster Software. Every month here at Facilitator Cards, we bring together a community of facilitators to explore a new tool, technique, or technology that we can use to enhance our facilitation practice. And this month we explored OBS, which allows you to never screen share again and create some really cool options to virtually enhance your facilitations. Anywhere you're using a webcam, you can now make it look far more interesting, far more dynamic, and far more fun for our participants. So in this recording, you will get a short demo of OBS, a guided walkthrough if you are interested in building along with us, if you've downloaded it but aren't really sure where to start. We get into some troubleshooting, and then we close out with some Q&A at the end. If you're interested in learning more about how to use OBS as a facilitator, check out links below where I will link you to all of the information that we have going. If you are using OBS as a facilitator, I would love to hear how you're using it and be able to share that with our wider community. So look us up on social media or drop some notes in the comments below, and I hope to catch you at a future Brain Jam. Thank you all so much for joining. Today's Brain Jam is about OBS, Open Broadcaster Software. It is something that I was totally unaware of 2 months ago and had never heard of before. And then as soon as I was introduced to it, I was like, oh, this is how people do that. Like, this is how those YouTubes are made and how those videos look and how people do that cool thing when they are streaming video games. I was always confused previously, and then this kind of demystified and pulled back the curtain. If you had never heard of OBS before, you are in good company. So we are going to be learning and exploring it together. I want to start today with just a quick demo / reminder of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of a screen share. So I'm just going to do that really quickly because OBS has basically helped me transition entirely and completely away from screen sharing. So I'm just going to here we go. Okay, so I am just going to show you kind of what a normal screen share looks like from your end, as many of you, I'm sure, spend a lot of time screen sharing, but not necessarily being facilitated. So just a reminder, this is kind of what it looks like. I have a deck here, I'm clicking through it. I did a little bit of intro of myself, mentioned I was a facilitator geek. Those are some of the other projects that I've worked on in the past. And here is today's focus. We are going to be learning and exploring OBS for virtual facilitations. So we're going to do in a moment an OBS demo. Then we're going to get into building in OBS. We're going to do some troubleshooting for those who something broke and it didn't work while we were building. And those of us who had a smooth experience, we're going to do some free building time. We'll get into some Q&A, and then we're going to wrap all of this up. And we're going to do all of that in the first hour of the Brain Jam. If you are here to stick around for that second hour, for that free exploration time, that's going to be completely open to who sticks around and who, what you all want to explore when we get there. So that's kind of what a typical screen share looks like from a participant's perspective. And it works. It's a little bit complicated. So let me show you what that could have looked like if I was, instead of screen sharing, I was using OBS. So I have just spotlighted myself in Zoom. That's all that happened. I basically forced you to see me as the main feature image. Hello, everybody, on the screen. And another way that you can do this in OBS, this looks a little weird here. There we go. Is with a click of a button, I can basically adjust my camera so that now, instead of seeing a screen share, you're seeing me and my slides simultaneously, right? And I can still click around in them just like I was previously switching slides. And you can do something really simple like this with OBS. You can also make it look a little prettier, a little more fancy, a little more like, ooh, what'd you just do there, Meg? I'm paying attention now. Tell me how to do that. So when we get into the building, which we're going to do in like 5 minutes, I'm going to teach you how to build this, just a plain camera so that it looks exactly like Zoom. And I'm going to teach you how to build this. the slightly fancier setup that you can make happen relatively easily in OBS. Something that I really like about this setup is that I can see my slides and I can see myself, so I know what you're seeing exactly versus screen sharing. Like as a facilitator, I often lose track of who's where and what are your reactions. The other thing that I can do is I can also make another scene where I become the main focus, but I don't lose my slides, right? My slides are still there. You're still seeing them. I'm still seeing them. But instead of paying attention to the slides, I've kind of directed your attention more to me. And in a recent workshop that I was doing, I was kind of pulling back and forth between those where I was talking about the slides and then I was kind of shifting, okay, back to the actual paying attention to that image, right? And all of that flexibility is really easy to control once you have OBS all set up. So, quick on spotlighting myself here. My question to you, for anybody who would like to answer, I'll just invite you to raise your hand in physical space in your in your real world, not the digital hand. Did anybody notice a difference for them as a participant between when I was screen sharing and when I was using OBS? Did anybody experience a difference? Yeah, and would you speak a little bit to that difference?
Yeah, uh, you were clearer and you were bigger, and and there was a better. It felt more like in a presentation mode when somebody's like standing in front of a screen and you're like your eyes are kind of like both going to the presenter and to the screen at the same time. So
Mhm.
I was more easily able to do that versus in Zoom where I'm like, look over there. Okay, now look at your thing. Like for some reason it felt more integrated, and I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's great. I'm not looking for anything in particular. I was just looking for what like your experience was, and that's been my experience too, is that it's less disorienting. You don't have to kind of switch your attention. Your attention can stay the whole time. Did anybody have a different experience? Yeah.
And my name's Pan, and
Hi, Pun.
it wasn't that it was different, but it was that it was enhanced because barring some of us who have visual impairment, the fact of the matter is that we respond to many different stimuli. You are able, with your very expressive face, to underline, to lead us through, and to even instigate certain emotional or intellectual responses by virtue of the signals that you were giving us,
Mm,
your visage. And that, to me, was a very important part of what this did.
beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I'm not even going to try to paraphrase that, Pun. I think you did such a beautiful articulation. The access to multiple kind of cues, right? Where you can take the cue from the face, but also from the words on the slide, like that becomes more possible when you're sharing the screen versus when all of their attention is directed in one place or another. Beautiful. Um, so there are a ton. I saw a question come into the chat. Is there a way to see your presenter notes as that screen is up? So the thing with OBS is you can, we'll get into answering that question in more detail, but what I'll say is you can basically have OBS pull any particular part of your window into focus. So when I'm in this mode, I'm not actually in presenter mode. I'm actually just having it look at just the slide portion of my window. So it's not, I'm not actually in presenter mode on Google in this moment. It's actually just up in like the editing mode, which you can see in a second because I can edit it live. So to answer your question, yes, you can definitely have your slides, but you could also have something entirely like you can definitely have your notes up and just not have it pull that part of the window into the frame. Okay, all right. So now that we have like properly knocked screen shares aside and said that this is more optimal, we're going to be using screen shares for the next little bit because in order to show you OBS, I can't use OBS, right? Because we're going to be building in OBS. I can't be using OBS to show you it because it gets meta and inception-y very quickly. So for this build portion of the Brain Jam, we are going to be screen sharing. So just know that this is like the meta part of it. You have to use the screen share feature in order to use it. So one thing before we jump into building, we need to kind of get set up and ready to build. So in order to do that, there's going to be a few things we're going to do. In order to make this scene, I'm going to send you a file in the Zoom chat. So if everybody can download the file that's coming through in the Zoom chat, and if you can download it to your desktop or to a downloads folder somewhere very easy for you to access, that'll be the first thing. And the second thing that I'll need you to do is I'm going to ask you to open this slide share or this slideshow that I sent in the chat, and I'm going to ask you to open that in its own window so that there are no other tabs on that window. It can be on Chrome or Safari or Firefox, whatever you use, but just make sure that it's in its own window with no shared tabs. Okay. All right, give me a thumbs up if you've got both of those things ready. Okay, great. So if you have both of those things, then the next step is we're going to start building in OBS. So what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to open OBS. And if you're working on one monitor, you might need to flip back and forth between OBS and Zoom. If you're working on two, this is a really great time to put OBS on your main monitor and put Zoom on your secondary monitor. Okay.
And where should we put that I did it slide that you had us open?
You can just have it kind of in the background. It doesn't need to, as long as it's up on your computer and like open, but it doesn't need to be ahead of any windows. All right. So if we've got OBS open, then I am going to start screen sharing and we're going to start building together. And this is the part where I'm going to remind you that if you get lost, just stick with us and we'll troubleshoot at the end, right? So I'll try to go slow. I've done this a couple of times. So the pacing, I like have a sense of pacing and I'll be watching your faces for like nods. So please do that. But if you are like, Meg, you lost me on step 3 and I can't catch up, we will troubleshoot at the end and I'll just invite you to keep watching so that you can learn along with folks. Okay. So I'm going to screen share. And here we go. Okay. So the first thing, I have lost all of your faces. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do in OBS is we're going to go up to this button that says Scene Collection. This is, and we're going to press New. So this is going to be right at the top. For Mac users, it's like in the main bar. For PC users, it's going to be where it says File and all of that. So we're going to hit New, and we're going to write Test. Okay, so when you've done that, I'm pulling up the chat here already. Okay. All right. So we have now a blank canvas to start working. So let me walk you through what OBS, how to build anything going on in OBS. So over here we have our scenes. So when I switched between my main camera and my my fancier scenes that you were seeing previously, that was me switching between scenes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename this scene. So we're going to right click on it and we're going to go up here to rename and we're going to title it main camera. Okay, so now we have our scene name, and now we're going to tell that scene where to pull information from. So that's what this column means, sources. Sources is basically like, what do you want me to show? So down here underneath the source column, we have a plus button, and that's going to let us add a source. So we're going to click on the plus, and we're going to select video capture device. Okay. And this pop-up just asks us if we want to name that video capture device. And we can leave it just as is. So we can just hit OK. And then we're going to have the option to choose which device we want. For most of us, you're going to have probably one or two options. For me, this is just showing my webcams. And I want to select, for me, Pro webcam, but for you, you're going to select whatever your main webcam is. So that might be FaceTime. If you're on a Mac PC, if your webcam has a name, you're going to select that webcam. And then you're going
Zoom is using it.
Okay, so if Zoom is using it and it doesn't allow you to do both, because for some people it will allow you to do both, you can turn it off in Zoom and see if that'll work in OBS. If it doesn't, know that we can troubleshoot that later. But for some people, it will allow you to pull it in to both places. Okay, so once you have your webcam selected, you just want to press OK. And then it's going to come in a little bit short, a little bit small. And all you're seeing me do is select the corner and drag it out so that it fills the entire window, the entire space. As soon as you go past, you'll see these gray bars, and that will mean that it's not going to show up on camera. The video capture device, ideally we have that just as your main feature, and you've filled the screen, and we just made the first scene. Like we just got the first scene done. So that's really exciting. If you've made it this far, congrats. If it's not working, we'll get you there. But we're gonna move to a second scene now. And we're gonna go over here to our scene column. We're gonna press the plus button. And this time we're gonna label it fancy, because we're going to make a fancy scene. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in this fancy scene is we're going to put in a background. I'm just going to make this even bigger so you all can see this even better. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a background. So we're going to we're going to be in sources, add, and this time we're going to add an image. And I'm going to name this image waves. And then you're going to click OK. And now you're going to tell OBS where to find that image. So the image I want you to use is that image I sent you earlier in Zoom chat. It should be called a calm waves image. And when you open that and stretch it out, it should fill the background. It should fill the scene. Okay. So the next thing we're going to add is we're going to add ourselves in. So, okay, I see in the chat. If your scene is small, if your window is really small, we'll troubleshoot that. We'll troubleshoot that in a bit. Just see if you can follow along, even if you can't get everything into the right spaces or the right size. Just see if you can add. All right, so next thing we're going to add our video back in here. So we're going to go to video capture device. So the plus button under sources, video capture device. And instead of adding a new one, we're just going to add the one we already did. So we're going to select add existing, select that video capture device, and press OK. And you should see your face come back into the scene. So with this scene, I don't want all of this extra background space. So what I'm going to show you how to do now is I'm going to show you how to crop this. So instead of rescaling it, which is when you go up here, right, and you can make it smaller or bigger when you drag that corner box, hover your mouse over the corner box and then hold down the Alt key and then click. And when you're holding down Alt, that allows you to crop. And you'll see these greens, I'm sorry, Option. Yes, Option for Mac, thank you. So when you hold down that Option key and then click and drag, you can crop the box to be much tighter on your face. So I'll invite everybody to do that. And then you can also, once you let go of the Alt key, you can still resize it. Okay. So now we have ourselves, we have our background. We're gonna add our name to the scene. So we're gonna go down to sources and add a source. And we're going to select text. I'm gonna title this text name. And then on the next pop-up, you'll have the option to type your text into a box. And so I'm just gonna type my name. There are lots of ways you can configure this later with fonts and colors, but for now, we're just gonna leave it plain and simple, white text, and hit OK. And I'm gonna go ahead and rescale this so that it's no bigger than my video. All right. So last thing we're gonna add to this scene is we're gonna add in the slides that I sent you. So in order to do that, I need to open up that link. So here we go. I'm gonna open up that link and now I'm ready as well. Okay, so we're gonna go down here to sources, into the plus. We are going to add a window capture. And we're gonna leave it titled window capture and hit OK. And then we're gonna tell OBS what window do we want it to see. And so I have a bunch of windows open, but what I'm looking for is one that's titled, I did it, OBS slide share. And that's what it should be called on yours as well, as long as it's on its own window. And again, if it doesn't show up, we will totally troubleshoot it and help you find it in a bit. So now I have my whole window, my whole Chrome window pulled into OBS. And obviously I don't want my participants to see all of this. This is quite messy. And so I'm gonna use that same Alt or Option, click and drag to crop the window down to just my slides. And then I'm gonna make that a little bit bigger. And we did it, we made the fancy scene. Okay. So we now have two scenes in OBS. And when you were watching me earlier on my in Zoom switch between these, all I was essentially doing was just clicking between the scenes. OBS automatically adds this little fade between them so it's not a jarring transition. But if you have done this and you have clicked through this, you have now built your first two scenes in OBS. And the final thing we're going to do before we check in with everyone is we're going to set ourselves up to actually use this camera now, to use OBS as our Zoom camera instead of the default camera that we're used to using in Zoom. And again, this may cause some glitches, and we will totally troubleshoot those. But in order to get Zoom using this camera, what we need to do is we need to come over to this controls column in the far right. And we want to hit Start Virtual Camera. And I see you, Emily. If you don't see any windows, we will troubleshoot that. It's definitely a permissions problem. So if you have, go ahead and click Start Virtual Camera. Okay. So if you've done that, if you've hit Start Virtual Camera, we're going to do one last step, and that step is in Zoom. So Start Virtual Camera is all the way to the right under the Controls column. And some of you are already making it happen. So if you've done that, if you hit Start Virtual Camera, and you're back in Zoom, down where it says Stop Camera in Zoom, you want to hit that little arrow. And instead of your default camera, you want to select OBS Virtual Cam. And if you're backwards, then go into your video settings. In Zoom, go into your video settings, and underneath camera, unselect Mirror My Video.
Can you say that again, Meg?
Absolutely. So if you're backwards, or you just aren't sure where this button that I'm talking about is, when you hit the little caret or the little arrow above the Stop Video button in Zoom, and then go into Video Settings, then you'll have the option to select a different camera. And what you want is OBS Virtual Cam. And then if you're backwards, you want to select Mirror My Video. You want to unselect that. All right. So I see some of you are like, I did it, you can tell. And some of you are like, you can tell that I am lost because it is not working. So that's all good. I would say I helped about 4 or 5 people set this up before this brain jam, and 100% of them had issues. So like, if you didn't have issues, you are like just knocking it out of the park. And if you had issues, you are like just par for the course. Took me 2 hours to do what we just tried to do in 15 minutes. So no problem there. And what we're going to do now is we're going to help all of you who got stuck. And those of you who did not get stuck, and you are now able to see your fancy setup in Zoom, I'm going to give you a chance to just play around with OBS. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try something out inspired by our last brain jam. We're going to go into breakout rooms for the next like 10 minutes. We're going to go into breakout rooms. And here is what I'm going to try something in OBS here. If it's going to happen, there we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to spotlight myself for a second. All right. So we have just spent the beginning of the brain jam in our computer lab. I'm trying to think of like physical spaces, right? So we just spent first half of the brain jam in the computer lab, trying things out, making things work. And now I'm going to invite you into one of a few breakout rooms. If you have things working and you just want a chance to free build and to just like play around with OBS with some other folks, then I'm going to invite you into breakout 1, 2, or 3. Okay? If you need help and you are having troubleshooting challenges, then I'm going to invite you into rooms 4 or 5. And me and one other person, Vivian, we did a lot of troubleshooting together yesterday. We are going to jump into those rooms and see if we can help you fix those problems. So in a moment, I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. If you want to just free build, I'll just invite you to hop into 1, 2, or 3. If you need troubleshooting help, please select 4 or 5.
Meg, where
Okay.
would you like me to be?
Vivian, if you want to hop into 4, I'll go to 5.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right, everyone. Any questions about where to go for the next 10 minutes? Did anybody, let's start with Jen. Jen, where did you get stuck?
This Jen or the other Jen?
That Jen.
Okay.
Sorry. Yep.
So I got stuck when I tried to add my face. Like I couldn't find the camera.
Okay.
And then I also couldn't find the slides. Like when I went to go find the slides, I couldn't find those. And then when I tried to do the start virtual camera, that didn't work either.
Okay, perfect. So all of it didn't work. So here's what I think probably happened. And this will probably be useful for Marcy and Beck as well, or Becky as well. So with Mac, you need to give OBS a bunch of permissions. And so the thing that you need to open is your system preferences. This is like on your Mac, right? So your system preferences, and then your security and privacy settings. And I apologize, Heather and Pam, that this is probably not relevant to you, but your security and your privacy settings. And so down in the list on the left side of all your security and privacy kind of like buckets, at the bottom, there's one called screen recording. And when you select that, you need to add OBS into, to have permission to do that. And so I can show you this really quickly. So here in screen recording, when you go to change anything in security and privacy, you need to unlock it first. So you need to unlock it with your computer's password. If that's something that you're like, I don't know my computer's password, then you'll have to come back to it later because that's going to be the first thing. But once you've unlocked that, then you can now add into the screen recording permissions, you can add OBS. And that's what you'll need to do is you'll need to find OBS in the list and add it to the screen recording permissions. Once it's in screen recording, you'll also need to add it to input monitoring, camera, and microphone. And when you do all of those things, and then you close OBS and open it back up, it should work.
What are the ones that you said? You said camera, microphone, and screen recording, just because my password doesn't seem to want to go right now.
Yep. And input monitoring is going to be the other piece. So those four, once they have permission with OBS and you close OBS and then open it anew, all of that should work. Because if it couldn't find the window, it's because it didn't have access to it. And if it couldn't bring in your camera, then it's probably because Zoom was using it or it was just like overloaded.
So Meg, when I go to camera, though, it doesn't allow me to add anything.
Right. So that is actually, you need to, in OBS, you need to try to add a camera in OBS, and then it will be like, oh, OBS wants permission to do this. So I would just say after the Zoom, or even maybe in between, if you want to try this at the end of the hour and then kind of hop back in, just so that Zoom isn't complicating anything, then it will work. It just needs to have that kind of pull of you trying to add it first.
And where do I add it in OBS? Is
So,
it when you do the capture, the video capture?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Meg, mine was a very different situation.
Sure.
I got as far as I got stuck when we went to add the slideshow, the slides.
Okay.
So in OBS, I have the wave background, I have my picture and my camera working, and I have my name.
Yep.
But when we went to add the slideshow, the window capture, I guess that was that the window capture?
The window capture.
Even though it shows up in my sources, it's not getting where it's supposed to be, I don't think.
Okay. So it shows up in your sources.
Yes.
Did you
I
select
added it evidently.
and press OK?
It's there under the column of sources.
Okay, perfect. Drag that to the top of your sources list. So in that column, it's on the
first
top.
one. Yeah.
Okay. Can you screen share with me?
Sure. Yes. Just a sec. Whoops. Here we go.
Okay. And it's just not show. Oh, it's way up here in the top left corner.
Oh, this little
and
thing?
Yep, and drag that big. Yep. Okay, cool. I don't know what's going on there, but it's there. That's what it is. I wonder if you have it very small on your, can you open up that window? Yeah, there you go. Now go back to OBS.
Oh.
Yep, there it goes. So it's because it was minimized. It was trying to pull in your minimized version, right? And you needed it to be like, this is how big it is on my actual computer. So if you make that much, much smaller now, it will work.
It seemed to me that Jennifer Braxton's was just the slide page instead of all the Google stuff.
So if you select that window capture in the sources list, yep.
Yeah.
And now make it smaller.
I'm having trouble getting the corners.
Yeah. I'll have you unscreen share for just a moment because this is really just a or I can actually stop it. There we go. Yeah, this is just getting that to slide over. But Jennifer, the other person who you were saying like she didn't have all of this displayed, that's just cropping it.
Okay.
Right. So it's
in the meantime, I apologize,
cropping.
but I have to leave. I'm so sorry because I'd rather stay here.
Best of luck.
Thanks for another time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, we have like 2 more minutes before we're going to bring everybody back. Heather, let's jump to you.
So my problem was with the video capture device. It seemed to do that. And then I had the little box that I was supposed to enlarge, but that box is black. There's no image of me.
I think that's, I think that might be a Zoom thing that you're trying to pull your camera into 2 different places at the same time. So I think either closing your video or stopping your video in Zoom and trying to re-add it in OBS might fix it.
Okay, I'll try it there when we're done with the Zoom.
But I think that's it. PCs don't generally have a lot of permissions. So that one should work like that.
Okay, I'll try it. Thanks.
Cool. Pun, did you have a question?
I'm embarrassed to say that I was being too polite. So when you said go to someplace and then hit new, I didn't see which the someplace was.
We got lost right there.
At the very beginning. Now, if you could just tell me, and I'm literally right up here, I have a second screen.
Yeah.
And if all you do is tell me which thing across the menu, which menu I go to hit new. You don't have to go through anything after that because I recognize at least 3 people on your screen. My personally know.
Perfect. So what it was just when you have OBS open,
and it is open and waiting.
At the very top where it says like file, edit, if you go to scene collection.
Scene collection. Okay. And that's where I hit new. Now it says give it a name though, right?
Yep. And you can name it test.
I'll just put TEXT just for now. Hit OK. And it not go to that single screen. That's the thing.
It's not going
when you showed
the main screen.
It went to one main screen. What I'm seeing now is preview and program. I won't take any more of your time if that is a conundrum at this point. I'm of the fact that you've already put all of this energy in for all of us. This is
no, I so appreciate that. So if I can, in the second half, if you have time to stick around for the second half of the Brain Jam, I'm happy to see if we can troubleshoot it more. And if you can't stick around, then I'm really happy to keep emailing with you. But I'm going to bring us all back to the main room.
You're kind. I appreciate it. And what I will probably do is, if I hope that it's stuck like to some of the other people who chose to go to the other room, so they must have learned something.
Okay, perfect.
I thank you for what you did already.
No problem. All right, I'm gonna hop back to the main room and I'm gonna close the breakout rooms in like 60 seconds. So just giving y'all a heads up.
Middle of explaining something, Meg. If
I can
finish it. Yeah, I know it's not. So Barb, I'm just gonna finish with what I was saying to you.
Oh, good. Look.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
good.
did it. See, there you go. You actually did it. And now not holding down the Alt key. If you would like to go back to those reds, you can make it bigger too.
Thank you.
Oh, you got it.
Awesome.
Nice job. Oh, that's exciting.
Woo, thank you. Great.
All right. So I know that for a lot of us, we are like, man, this is not working and I can't see it like happen right now. And that can be really frustrating. Know that like I am like super determined to help you make this work if you want it to work, because it is really cool and it's totally possible. But if it's not working right now, like know that I'm happy to keep troubleshooting if we didn't get to a place where it is. I think that some of the complications that might be happening right now is that we're trying to use Zoom and OBS for the first time together, right? And so having them communicate well and having them play nice, obviously it can play nice because I'm using it and a lot of other people are, but it might just be that that initial setup is really challenging for your computer to know where is what. So I apologize if that has been frustrating. I'm really excited for those who figured it out. And I just want to let you know I'm super here to help you figure it out if you want to continue to. For those who were able to keep building, did anybody try out new things that they would like to show people, or to say like, hey, I figured out how to do this? I see some things happening on camera. So like Jonah, you've got multiple things going on over here. Can I spotlight you for a sec and maybe you can share with us what you have going on in your OBS? Would you be up for that? Awesome. So tell us what you did over here, Jonah.
If you can't hear me, all good. My computer is working hard, but instead of the slideshow, I just went to a YouTube video and used that as the scene. So that's why you can see the video, although you can't see the video now, since maybe I'm tapped out of that. I only have one monitor, so can't see that, but yeah, just like what you taught us, but with a video instead.
Awesome. And Katie, I see you doing that as well. Can I hop over to you, Katie?
Yes, you can.
Awesome.
So yeah, I kind of did what Jonah did. We were in the same room with being able to add a video. I will be honest, I don't know how to turn the video off at this point. But it's playing and it's highlights from basketball games. So
awesome. I think that if it's built into OBS, it's going to keep looping the video. That's actually one of the cool things, is that it can just keep looping it if it's built in natively to OBS. If you added that,
do videos real quick play sound? Like
so
this could. How do you incorporate sound?
Yeah, so yes, the answer is absolutely yes. You can incorporate sound and you can pull sound from OBS into Zoom, but I would say that is a 301, 401 level sort of thing. And so you don't have to get into any of that to use OBS in Zoom, but you can. It just takes a couple more steps and a couple of YouTube tutorials, but you can definitely get it to do that. So we have about 10 minutes left. And I wanted to just open it up for a moment to see if anybody had any non-troubleshooty questions, but questions about like using OBS as a facilitator. I would be really curious, especially if you can't stick around for that second hour. If you have questions about using OBS as a facilitator that we, the folks who are sticking around for the second hour, can like experiment with and try out, I would be really excited to hear those.
Meg.
Heather. Oh, sorry. I see you, Barb. I'll go to Barb and then I'll go.
Heather, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Barb.
Okay. Well, I'm very curious. So a very basic question. I don't use a lot of slides when I'm facilitating. So I'm just curious about how you use it in those settings. Is it more geared for, bringing up some type of screen share, but not screen share?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example, Barb. I don't tend to use a lot of slides in my presentations either. And some of it is just because I don't want to, I want it to feel personal and I want it to feel intimate. So here's like at the very beginning of the Brain Jam, when I did slides to kind of show you my agenda, I often use slides just to keep me on track, right? Just to make sure that I hit everything I need to say. So here's an alternative that you could set up with OBS. So I'm going to spotlight myself just so it's a little easier for you all to see this. So instead of slides, you could do this. You could have just like little, okay, part 1, we're going to start building in OBS. Part 2, we're going to do some breakout rooms. Part 3, which we're in right now, we're going to do some Q&A. And part 4, we're going to wrap up in just a moment. So that's not I wouldn't even say that that's kind of worth doing as a slide because it's so little information. But to me, it's kind of visually interesting. I could use it to mark throughout the workshop, right? And be like, okay, so now we're going to transition into a second part. We're going to move into our Q&A. And it's just kind of like this visual marker for participants. And all this is just an image with a see-through background on OBS. So you all know how to do this because you added a image in OBS. We used it as the background, but this is just a transparent image that's on top of my video. And somebody asked, are these all different scenes? These aren't different scenes. I just am toggling on and off whether you can see the image or not. So in OBS, there's like a little eye icon next to each specific source. And if you toggle that on and off, that's all that I'm doing. I'm just toggling that on and off.
And how are you changing the image? Are you changing that? You're changing that on your screen and screen capturing your screen?
So the images are all loaded into my in my scene, in my main scene. I have 5 images,
okay.
Part 1, part 2, etc. And right now they're all toggled off. And then I just toggle one on and then toggle that back off.
Gotcha.
Yep. Okay, Bex. I'm sorry, Heather, and then Bex. Becky, I'm sorry, Becky, we have somebody who often comes to Brain Jams whose name is Bex, and that is what is throwing me. Heather, I'm throwing it over to you.
Okay, so if you're using OBS to do your entire session, it's an hour-long session.
Yep.
You go in beforehand and you can set up like transition and everything. You can like lay the whole hour and then toggle back and forth like you're doing with these images, with the slides, with whatever, and you just run it all from that OBS monitor thing, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so lots of pre-planning, but then it's all set to go.
That's exactly right. So I would say the biggest thing with OBS is that I think OBS allows us to kind of transition from having to do a bunch of management in the moment to having to do a bunch of management ahead of time. And for me as a facilitator, that means that I can do a lot less. I can do a lot less managing in the moment, right? So I can be more present for participants in the moment, but I had to do more work ahead of time to make that happen. So I don't think it's a little bit more work, but all of that work is before your workshop, and that I think is a huge help.
And then if breakouts included in this, then you're juggling back and forth between OBS and Zoom so that you can control the breakouts in Zoom.
Yes. So when I'm manipulating my camera, that's when I'm using OBS, right? When I'm doing something in my camera. Everything else is still happening in Zoom. Yep. All right, Becky, and then we might need to move into wrapping up.
Can I just add something that I thought was really exciting that you do, which is that you're able to control OBS from your phone?
Oh, you're spoiling, spoiler alert.
Yeah,
I'll show you.
Sorry,
No, that's okay, Vivian. I was just going to share that.
I thought that was really, really valuable, going back to saving my mental space.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And I was just going to end on like that question, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Becky.
That actually was my question. I had seen you with the cell phone and the app, and I was just curious how that integrates. And it probably was along with Jen's question in the chat too about looking at one screen. So you're looking at the cell phone, but are you also looking at just one screen, or are you toggling between? It sounds like the OBS is just the camera portion, like just your video
just
file
the camera portion. It is just the camera portion, and that's all that OBS is. I do think running OBS is very helpful to have 2 screens. That doesn't mean you have to have 2 monitors, right? You can have your laptop and a monitor, like that would be more than enough, just so you can have OBS off to the side and you can be looking at Zoom as your main screen. So this is like a whole other software, which is why I didn't introduce it earlier. And this is something that we will be exploring in the May Brain Jam, but we can totally get into how you can use it for OBS this month, but I think there's a lot of potential. There's a thing called Stream Deck, which allows you to control OBS on an app. So this is an app on my phone, and when I touch a scene, it changes it in OBS, and it changes it, therefore, because I'm using my OBS camera, it also changes it in Zoom. So most of what I've been doing today, when I've been switching my camera around, I haven't been clicking in OBS. You can do that, absolutely. That's the simplest way to do it, is to click the different scenes in OBS. But you can also set up this app called Stream Deck and then just tell it, I want to change to this source or this scene, and I want to change to this scene. And you can just do all of that by clicking a button on your phone. So with OBS, you're able to set up things where there's hotkeys on your computer. So you can hit like a set of 2 keys and it will switch scenes. We didn't get into that today, but that's a really easy thing to do in OBS. If you don't want to mess with this whole other app, like that's the simplest way to switch scenes, is just to set up some hotkeys in OBS. But if you want to get more technical, if you want to, like, if you're like, this is awesome, I want to do all of this, then there is one more, I would say, app to add to make this a little bit more seamless as a facilitator. All right. So I know folks have to head out. A lot of folks have to head out at the hour mark. So I just want to say thank you all so much for being willing to dive in and to try something new out. I know that it is it can be an intimidating interface, and I hope for a lot of you we made that so much more possible for you to use in your future workshops and facilitations. So thank you so much for coming. If you want to stick around for the second hour, we are just going to get geeky with it. We're just going to go and we're going to dive. We can dive in deep. We can do more troubleshooting. We can talk about like what potential does this have for working with a remote presenter? Like how could that open up new possibilities? We'll get into all of that in the second hour. But if you have to head out, I'll just invite you to unmute, to give us a wave, and I hope to see you at a future Brain Jam.
Thanks, Meg. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.